Are you the keymaster? Welcome back to DEStalks. I am Chase, your host here. I am joined today with our co-host Rob, with our special guest Tiffany Barfield. Good morning, all. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am so glad that we are all here together. Before we got started here, we kind of talked about the weather and the difference, of what we have going back and forth here. And I'm up here freezing while they're down there trying to open up their windows. And I'm just a little jealous this morning, but that's okay.
Well, I find it ironic as you're saying that. I'm looking at our screen. You're in our DEStalks t-shirt, and I'm over here in a sweater.
Professional.
Yeah, I'm in a sweater. It's 74 degrees, and you're in a t-shirt, and it's like 36 right now. There's irony in that.
There's some irony there. Well, Miss Barfield, we're so glad that you are here today. We're just super excited to have you. You're coming all the way from Sarasota, Florida to us today. So we're excited to have you. So Miss Barfield, we wanted to talk to you today, and we wanted to start off with how impressive you are. I started doing some research into you preparing for this, and I am just blown away with what you have been able to do. As I understand it, you come from the Houston area. You went all the way to Texas A&M. From A&M, you went to DC, worked your way into the White House somehow. Right. And then you have had an incredible career of advocacy and just beautiful work that you have done. I could go on, but tell us a little bit of who you are. Tell our audience who you are, Ms. Barfield.
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be on and just love to connect, and thanks again. So as you said, I'm a very proud born and raised Texan. I was born in Pasadena. In fact, my parents still live there and just grew up in Pasadena, went to school in Pasadena, actually went to San Jack Junior College for 2 years because my parents said, well, you're not ready to go away to school. And I was very upset by that. I was like, oh, you're the worst parents in the world. How could you not let me leave immediately? But it turned out to be the best thing. And of all things, which I fully disclosed this to my friends, is I wanted to go to that other small university in Austin. Yes. And I did not get accepted as a transfer student, but I did get accepted to Texas A&M. And well, on multiple levels, believing in a higher power, God placed me at the absolute right place. So I transferred to A&M 96, and was placed with a college roommate who is still, Robin, is still one of my best friends today. And her children and her husband are just our dear friends. And
good.
I always think that's one of the fun things about going away to school is getting placed with someone that you don't know and how they become a lifelong friend. So at Texas A&M, as you know, I dove into what's called the other education, which is all the clubs and all of the things that you can be active in and volunteer and giving back. I was on the hospitality committee. I was a part of Traditions Council. I was part of Best Buddies. Everything you can imagine. And then I decided to change my major to go into education. My grandparents were in education. My mom worked in the neighboring school district. And I'll never forget Robin. I came home. I said, well, I'm going to change the world. I'm going to be an education major now. Also, it may have been I wanted to keep a little bit more extra time at Texas A&M because I loved it so much. So I took a victory lap. So I stayed an extra year. And
much like at the junior college, you just weren't ready yet. You weren't ready to go. You needed a little bit more time. That's okay.
Absolutely. I loved it. So while I was at A&M, I actually was on Traditions Council the year that the Aggie bonfire fell. And so part of that was being on Traditions Council. We organized the day that the bonfire fell, an event in Reed Arena. And then we also, where the bonfire site was, we did a candlelight ceremony. And it was one of those first times kind of seeing a way a community could come together and they want to give and they want to support. The University of Texas, whenever we played the football game, they played the Aggie War Hymn. They sent money. They had blood drives. So just the connection to humanity and just loving Texas A&M, and absolutely, finally Gary Barfield was like, the check is cut off. You need to graduate.
Enough is enough.
Enough is enough. Made it through, graduated, and went to visit a friend in DC and noticed the Capitol was run by young people before I was starting my student teaching. And I was like, well, I like to run things. I want to give this a shot. So January 14th, 2001, my wonderful father drove what I called my car, my 1995 Snow White Mustang, up to DC. I flew on a one-way trip, had found a house with a group of girls to live with, and started pounding the pavement, getting my resume out everywhere. And well, as I said, I love Texas A&M and those Aggie connections. I got connected to an Aggie, Michael Crane, and he said, will you pass out some tickets for black tie and boots and deliver them all over the city? I was like, absolutely. So I was running all over the city. He ended up giving me a ticket that night to the event. I went, volunteered. Reveille was there. So, the Ross volunteers, it was all amazing. And then Michael called me a few days later and he said, the White House Domestic Policy Office is looking for some help. Can you go in? And I was like, absolutely. Yeah. So I went and volunteered for 2 days, and they offered me a full-time job as the receptionist staff assistant to the Domestic Policy Council. Whoa. Now, to thread it back to Texas A&M, one of my favorite stories is math is a subject I do not like. And I think that goes the stereotype for women. When you're in 3rd grade or 4th grade, if you're not good at math, you're just, I give up. Never really had to work through math, if you will. I managed to get by. Took it at junior college, the remedial course. Never got through the remedial course. Well, for some reason, I thought I could pass Math 141 at Texas A&M. That was one of the poorest decisions I've ever made. So I failed that bad boy with flying colors.
No.
Oh, yes. And one of the things about failing is when your grade point average drops below a 2.0, you can't be involved in all the clubs.
No, you cannot.
No, you cannot. And from previously saying earlier, I love the clubs. That's what I love about Texas A&M. So I heard about this test you could take for math anxiety. So I went to the psychology department and Gary Barfield paid $500 for me to take the math anxiety test. And lo and behold, I have math anxiety. So I had to go see Dr. Frank Ashley and take all my proof and letters and say, Dr. Ashley, because I have math anxiety, I have the option, you have the option to no grade my Math 141. So taking that, zeroing it out will put me up over 2.0 so I can be involved in the clubs, obviously, most important. So Dr. Ashley did, and I was able to get back into the clubs and really and truly, Dr. Ashley is a friend and a mentor to this day. He saved my career at Texas A&M. But I think the best quip that I get out of this story that I told even my fish camp, I had a fish camp named after me in 2019 at A&M, is because Dr. Ashley no-graded my 1.6, to which many people, I wear it as a badge of honor. I had a 1.6 in college. He no-graded my 1.6. My first job out of Texas A&M was at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And it was because Dr. Ashley believed in me, took a chance, and I was able to stay at Texas A&M. So there is not enough I can say about Aggie Land and how much I love it. And I know that God did not want me to go to that university that has orange. I do have a lot of friends there. And now that they're in the SEC, but whatever. I just can't say enough. So that set me on my trajectory. So I got my first job at the White House.
First job being at the White House, Tiffany. Wow.
Right out of college.
My first job, I stood, I think I was working for an extended school program, making minimum wage, watching kids. I couldn't imagine my first job going from running councils of my peers, right? Because that's what you were doing. You were running clubs and councils with your peers, to literally jumping in a car. Your dad, as you said, drove your car because he sounds like an awesome person. I hope to meet him one day.
Yes.
But drove your car up there for you. You get up there, you put the work in. 2 days later, you're sitting in sitting there having a job offer for the White House. It goes to speak a lot about who you are as a person and the energy that you give out. That's amazing. So you said that's in July, correct? So you started working around the White House in July, August timeframe of 2001?
Actually, we had the extended January 2000 go to the Supreme Court, who's the president. So I started in the White House February of 2001.
Whoa.
Okay.
So you started in February 2000.
Yeah. So she left college, okay, after taking a victory lap year, is what she said, what you said.
So I could go to the football games.
Yeah. You're in great company here, because if being a senior and stretching that out as a victory lap, Chase and I both collectively, I think, took 6 years worth of victory laps between the two of us. So you're in great company. I had a blast, and that's definitely why I stuck around an extra 3 years, because I had such a good time in college. But I was thinking, Chase, you were talking about how you worked ESP was your first job, right?
Yeah, one of my first jobs, yep.
So I was thinking to myself, well, what was my first job where I felt responsibility? Tiffany, you do put off great energy. I can completely understand why people would want to be around you. It's infectious. And now I'm thinking selfishly about myself. My first job was I worked at a Christmas tree farm, unloading Christmas trees off of a semi truck and loading it in the back warehouse. So by comparison, Tiffany gets a job at the White House because she's charismatic, intelligent, and all these things. I'm unloading Christmas trees into a warehouse. And here we both are sitting on a podcast. What a small world. But more importantly, I think, Tiffany, that speaks to resilience, right? You get told no at a certain place, I won't say their name, but a university in Austin. And so you have to go to A&M. And what do? You make the best of it. And you follow those opportunities. Chase and I talk about that all the time, especially for our military community. I know you shared with us, your father served in the military.
He did.
So you understand, sometimes you get placed in an area you don't want to be. No one wants to go to Fort Polk, Louisiana. Sorry if you're at Polk right now.
Yep, sorry all my Mountain Division people.
Sorry, dudes.
Don't know what you're doing down there in Fort Polk, but we're with you.
But you hear it all the time. Like, I don't want to go there. There's nothing there. It's going to be horrible. But if you follow the Tiffany Barfield model, any place can be great. It is what you make of it. You have those opportunities, and just maybe it could lead to an opportunity inside the White House. And so I'm dying to know. You start in February of 2001. Anybody that's listening to this podcast, I'm sure immediately heard 2001 and went, oh, when did she start? So I'm naturally curious. I remember where I was in September of 2001. I hope this doesn't make either of you feel bad, but I was in a 6th grade classroom. And I remember my instructor, or my teacher, Mr. Duke, came up and explained to us what happened, and the energy just being sucked out of that room, even in 6th grade. So what was that like for you because you were working in the White House on September 11th. What was the energy like in the White House whenever y'all found out what happened?
I actually had to be in the West Wing early that morning. I was filling in for Margaret Spelling's assistant because it was her birthday and she had taken the morning for herself. So I was there, and the first plane had hit, and I remember seeing the AP clip. That is when they thought it was a Cessna. And people were moving around, and I ended up going back to my office in the old executive building. And I was on the 2nd floor and further down the office of the second lady, so Mrs. Cheney's office. But right next to her was one of the alphabet agencies that was behind a locked door. You just kind of, you would see them, never talk to them, but they flew out and the door flew open, and you just knew that it was bad. And they told us to evacuate. And a dear friend and mentor, Marissa Perez, and I had a car parked on the ellipse, and we ran out. And by that time, they had the jets scrambling and above. and the Secret Service had opened the gates. And I just remember running past a Secret Service agent and him saying, "Holy shit, what is that?" And it was the planes that had been scrambling. And they were screaming at us, "Ladies, take off your shoes." So I kicked my heels as far as I could. Marissa kicked hers off. We ran and picked him up. And I grabbed her hand and I said, "Say the Lord's Prayer with me." So we said the Lord's Prayer, running to my car. We got our car, and her dad was a firefighter in San Antonio, and he was like, "Get as far out of town as you can." So we ran and got her little dog, Roni, from her apartment and drove to Fredericksburg, Virginia, checked into a Best Western and just watched the news and cried and didn't talk. And we both had gotten a call that evening that we were expected back at the White House on September 12th. Wow. And we knew that we needed to go back, even though I was a tiny little staff assistant. If answering phones and, getting stuff scheduled, whatever I could do to support, because you just knew that our world had changed. And so from that, every September 11th, I talked to Marissa Perez, and it is just something I feel that especially new, younger generations, if you will.
Yeah.
What we went through, but moreover, President Bush keeping us safe. And thank you both for your service and for all those that sacrifice to keep us safe and to keep our freedoms. I think it's one of those, when you bring it up and people are talking about 9/11 and you're like, I was in the White House, that immediate gasp as to, and you think, my goodness, we're about to hit,
I can imagine
23, how has it been, 24 years? So but I just went back knowing that, continues to serve and do what I can.
So at what point did you find out what was taking place? At what point did everything dawn on you? Because you're talking, and to relate it for everyone who's listening, Chase and I have both been in situations and in scenarios where you're told to move, execute, do something right now. And we don't know what's happening, but we're doing what we're told. And so, or what we're trained to do. You're doing what you're trained to do. And then you kind of, everything hits you later, after the fact. After the job is done, then you can sit with it. And that's what you were talking about when y'all got to Fredericksburg and you got to that hotel. But when you're leaving the White House, when did it hit you, or when were you told what had happened?
There were some TVs where you saw the trade centers being hit. And I think that when they were telling us to run, and you didn't know that what was coming next, and the Pentagon had been hit, and just I think even now it's one of those, to your point, of just like going through the motion to get out. Like, we were told to get out, let's go. How do you process? I think seeing it on the news, the devastation and how tragic and emotional, but the next day when I was driving into the White House and the Pentagon still being on fire, that's when it just rippled through my body and soul as to America's changed.
Did you see that? As you're talking, I mean, I was a kid. I was a child when this took place. But even as a child, I understood the impact to a degree, right? To a degree. I understood the impact that it would have. And then later, years later, you can see the impact that it had on travel, what have you. But for you, did you see a switch flipped in the White House and in the government, and in that governmental system, where you went from peacetime, everything's great, President Bush has just come in, and taken over and is doing a phenomenal job, to now he's a wartime president. Now all the work that you've been doing, did it switch gears at all for you after the incident?
Everyone felt this is more than just a pivot. And what's going to be happening, what's next. That following week, we received another threat. And so we had to evacuate again. And I think, again, being 22, 23 years old, having to process, like, is this the new normal? Or how do you even answer that question? But I was able to, I think it's just such a testament to the amazing humans that the president surrounded himself with that worked for him. It was all service above self. And so I was post working in domestic policy. I was able to go to what I call the happiest office in the White House, the visitor's office. So we were able to get tours started back to welcome people to the People's House, which is the White House. So overall and overarching, I am sure way above my pay grade and where I was on what pivoted. But to be able to stay in the administration and then work on the campaign and the reelect in 2004, I believe that and know that the president, and again, because of your service and all those that served and sacrificed, we've been able to stay safe.
Yeah. Well, that's the second time you've said that. And be clear, service takes many shapes and forms. You served during wartime. So thank you. Because
Thank you.
Even if you had, even if you're just a junior inside of that department, you're still there. You understand the impact. You understand the mission and how it shifts and it works. So thank you. I can only imagine. Again, I was only a child. I can only imagine what that was like. Chase was 5 years older than me. That's why he looks so much older than me. But sorry, Bubba. So I'm sure his impact is a little different. But yeah, I was very curious what that situation was like. I've had the opportunity to meet Mr. Bush many times, and he is such a kind man. And has he always been like that?
Absolutely say so. Just when and again, I was just a lonely little staffer.
Sure.
But the opportunities, from various events and what have you, I would just say character and dignity matter to him and how you treat others. And above all, that is also the people that he surrounded himself with. I am lucky enough to have had, I would say, a vivid tapestry of opportunities in DC, from working as a political appointee at HHS to the campaign to doing some of the travels in advance. But so many of the folks are still 20 plus years later, our dear friends and mentors to me today. And it was when we talked initially, kind of starting out with those kind of human beings who put service above self, treat everyone with dignity, are kind. That is an unbelievable way to start out your career. And that so many of these folks, you pick up the phone and they'll answer. And it's just, it was an honor. It was a privilege. And it is something I'm so thankful to God that I had that experience and the people that he placed in my life because of.
Well, I can only
It
imagine.
is a very unique experience that you've had. That's both traumatizing. I can imagine it would take me a while to work through that, but also all the opportunities that have come up and being able to perform at the high level, to be able to still be able to consider those people friends today, 20 plus years later, is amazing. And you've gone through such different paths. So what led you, and I love this conversation. We can continue having this, but I want to kind of move on here because there's so much more to who you are and what you do other than your 9/11 experience. So what brought you, and I want to kind of move on. After that, you spent 6 years working at the White House and doing the political under 41, under George W. Bush, right? And then you moved on to working with our communities with special needs, right? And special education. What brought you there?
So I actually moved post Washington, D.C. to New York and worked in the financial services sector and a private equity firm. But
Yes.
the special needs community is personal to me because of my sister. Trina was born with partial trisomy 13. She couldn't walk or talk and lived in a baby bed for all of her life until she passed at 21. My father was exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam, and the data that we have seen and others is the first child, which was me, was the one that was born okay, and it was the second child that had horrible disabilities, which Trina did. But seeing my parents, even at my age, today are my heroes, and seeing what they did and what they went through for Trina. So Trina was placed in a nursing home when she was 3 months old because she needed 24-hour care. And it's not something that my parents did or they wanted to do, but they just knew that that was going to be the best thing. When I walked in one time, my sister was choking because one of her other abnormalities was she had a very small esophagus. And my father was holding her upside down by her feet, because when you hold a baby upside down by their feet, it's a natural gag reflex to release the esophagus. So Trina stopped choking, but I started screaming. So my parents knew, because I thought he was trying to hurt Trina and my little bitty 2.5-year-old self. My parents knew that at that moment she needed 24-hour care. And they found a wonderful facility where Trina lived all of her life, called Thomas Care Center, that was in Houston. It's no longer around. And my parents made her room look like her room. And when we moved Trina out, my mom was sitting in the living room, and she said she watched me come out of my room, and I walked into Trina's room. And when I left Trina's room, I closed the door. And we kept that door closed for about 6 months. And you can take symbolism in all different kinds of ways. And was that, a death of Trina leaving us? And so my mom went every 2 weeks to get Trina's clothes. We washed Trina's clothes. Part of my allowance was writing Trina's name on her diapers, because my mom wanted her to have Pampers. So I would write in a ballpoint pen, Trina, and get allowance for that. My father was the president of the association many times, the Parents Association. They had parents who went through the same kind of tragedy. There's all kinds of words you can put on it, but having a child that is quote unquote not normal and has illness and sickness, I can't imagine anything worse a parent has to go through. So
I can't either.
I started my advocacy by watching my father. He testified in the Texas State Legislature. My mom was always involved. And there was a time that they were looking at potentially closing Trina's facility. And, even though it was a private facility, I'm sure it had some government funding. So they did a call out for all the parents to write Senator Chet Edwards. So in my first grade handwriting, and I still wish I had the letter, my mom got it laminated, but I wrote him, I was like, "Dear Senator Edwards, please don't close my sister's home. Dad will have to work extra jobs, and he will not be home to play with me, and that will make my mom sad too." So many folks ask kind of, where do I get that advocacy bug? And knowing that I wanted to make things better, as good as I could for Trina and those with disabilities, I call that my heart's passion work. And I'm extremely passionate about the disability community, because I believe there is dignity in work for everybody. Everyone should be treated with kindness. Words matter. I am someone who, the R word, I will claw your eyes out. I don't care who you are. It is offensive. It is wrong. It's derogatory. And just because someone, as we talked, I sat on the board of directors for the National Down Syndrome Society for 13 years. My final 2 years, I was chairwoman, and it was an honor of a lifetime to be able to serve and connect. But the same thing, because you have an extra chromosome, like our friends with Down syndrome, they have 3 of the 21. It might make you different, but just because someone's different, you don't have to treat them. So that is my how I've worked with the community. I am still an advocate. I am passionate about the community so that they can have equal access. And one of the things while I was on the board, and we're still fighting to this day, and I think the piece when the general population finds out about how others are discriminated against, the National Down Syndrome Society has been having to go state by state for organ transplant discrimination. You can legally discriminate against someone with a disability for an organ. All that is wrong. There is no other way.
I didn't know that.
We're hopeful that there's going to be a reintroduction in Congress. Our friends in Congress haven't been able to get it through, so maybe they can. But there's these policies that still hurt and hamper people with disabilities and families with disabilities. So there's still a lot more work and advocacy to do.
So those disabilities are not covered under our current laws that we have right now, federally or state level, is what you're saying, that they can still discriminate based on a disability to receive medical care. That doesn't make any sense.
There was a story about a state that a doctor, there was a young man with Down syndrome who was nonverbal, may have had potentially was on the spectrum. But the story got told, and the way I interpret it is the doctor basically said to the family, "Well, is his life worth saving? Excuse me?
Whoa.
About their child. Oh, those are fighting words.
Completely. I was lucky enough in my one of my roles, I had Michigan as a state, and my lobbyist became a dear friend, and he knew that this was my heart's passion. And Michigan did not have the law on the books where they did have the law where you could discriminate, and we were able to get it changed. And I remember, again, higher power. I think God meant to take my voice away that day. So I was hoarse. We were talking with the senator. He was very grouchy. I think that's the nicest way I could say that. And I was explaining that the same thing, like families. And he was talking about a woman that worked with him, and she had a lung transplant, but she had cerebral palsy and was essentially the same type of, well, was it worth her life saving? Mm-hmm. I thought I was going to come across the table. I remember my lobbyist just kind of, and all I could muster the words was, sir, I'm not going to tell any mother or father that their child's life is not worth saving. So perception, words matter. And when the general population understands, I think that's really and truly how you get smart public policy and advocacy done.
I couldn't agree more. Once you get out there and people actually understand, because I can generally say that I had no idea that we still had discriminatory laws on the books like that. And my background is in disability studies. So that's alarming to me. I'm a little embarrassed I didn't know that. But it also echoes true to our military community here, because and Tiffany, you could probably speak more to this than we can. But I do know that we as a military community are at a greater risk of having children with disabilities just due to our exposure. So this is very near and dear, not only to you, Tiffany, but it's near and dear to our military community that we serve as well, because a lot of us don't even know what to look for. A lot of us are deniers because there is a public scrutiny around having a child with disability still. And it's, and not raising your hand and saying, I need help, which is sad.
No.
Especially if you have policies that are, there again, a barrier, to helping your child or anybody get the quality of care that they deserve.
Absolutely. I mean, there are so many, even the one that really gets me, that still gets me, that we're having to go state by state. There's a law at the Department of Labor called C, and it's a certificate that you can pull, which actually started from World War II, when companies are like, well, if these veterans come back and they really aren't at 100%, but we can hire them, let's just pay them sub-minimum wage. Mm-hmm. Excuse me? It's still in the books. We are in 2025. We are having to go state by state. Our friends in Florida, there are 19 companies here that still pull their certificate and pay someone with a disability sub-minimum wage. That's all kinds of wrong. There is dignity in work, no matter what you are doing.
Sure is.
But to your point, families sometimes don't want to speak up because they say, well, I'd much rather my son or daughter have somewhere to go. Which I can understand that there's work there, but it's absolutely wrong for the company to be making a profit margin off the backs of people who are getting paid less. And someone's life is not worth less than. And I think that all goes back to my advocacy, the way that I was brought up. And my grandmother, Marie Barfield, always said, to whom much is given, much is expected. And so many people want to wrap that up in a bow by having means as far as money and everything else. And I say, absolutely not. It is your voice and it is your love that is a privilege. And when you are given a lot of it, then you need to do something with it.
That's extremely well said. I'm listening to you talk, and I said earlier that makes no sense. In both scenarios that you just laid out, from a healthcare and from an employment standpoint, why are we still allowing... I don't understand this juxtaposition that we find ourselves in right now, in the U.S. we have people making decisions for others without any kind of consultation. If someone is working a job and they're performing the exact same task as their counterpart who may or may not have a disability, then there shouldn't be a pay disparity, right? If the level of work is the same, then the pay should be the same, regardless. There are so many issues right now that we're facing, as an American public, that surround individuals with disabilities, with women here in the United States. I don't want to go into that issue because I don't have a leg to stand on, but we're making decisions for others. And that to me, that is the most illogical decision-making process, to make decisions for others without any kind of consultation. And then whenever you do stand up, for you, Tiffany, you've been standing up since you were in first grade, but you do stand up. I can only imagine the amount of walls that you're running through your entire life, the amount of no's that you hear, and to continue to push. That's motivational for people like Chase and I, because much like you, Chase and I are trying to take an opportunity to make an impact inside of our veteran community, just in higher education. That alone is an uphill battle. Luckily, I'm blessed to have my brother and our family supporting our efforts. And so what could we do as lay people? Again, my children, I have two healthy, beautiful boys, but what can I do for those listening? What can they do to support the mission that you're pioneering here for us?
No, I think it's last week I was a moderator for a women's panel for the Junior League here in Sarasota, and it was about advocacy. And I told the audience, everyone can be an advocate. So how you described being a lay person, everyone can be an advocate. That is one of the most precious and beautiful things about our freedom and democracy is you have a voice, no matter where you sit. So if you have a child with a disability, there are people out there that want to connect. There are people out there that want to do more. What are the local laws that are impacting your child? Call the school board, call the, who do you need to talk to? A state rep, find a collective impact, find an organization. I can promise you there is a lobby organization out there for everything. Use your voice. And life is such a privilege. And to be able to make an impact, that is the most important thing to me. And I think it's a combination of seeing my parents. My grandmother was strong as anything. She got her master's degree when most women didn't go to college, and she didn't.
That's impressive.
And the same when, even with my father, similar to my father, when he has to, he's 100% disabled vet. So having to go to hospitals, that's another area. It's like, we've got to train some of these nurses and doctors and staff as to how to deal better with our veterans, especially if they're suffering PTSD and many other complications. Well, the doctors, my mom goes in and she's so nice and sweet. And she calls me, she's like, oh, here comes my bulldog. I don't tolerate anything. Everyone needs an advocate. So to thread that back together, be an advocate, find someone, make your voice known. Don't take it sitting down. And I think we're finally seeing that by generations. Some I disagree, like what they're, but we're able to have the First Amendment lets us have, our own beliefs and everything, but finding worthy causes, defending people who can be defenseless, to me, there's no greater calling.
One of my favorite sayings, and I'm going to quote Father Michael Hurst on this one. Father here. All right. Closed mouths don't get fed. My dad used to say that to me all the time. I was such a stoic child. I would just take it on the chin, and I remember my dad as an adult looking at me and said, son, closed mouths don't get fed. If you don't speak up for yourself, then nobody will, and you've got to be your own advocate. You've got to, if you need something, you have to open your mouth and you have to say something. And I love that, just saying something, getting involved. I love what you said. And I'm going to echo that. Get involved in your local level. People tend to think that, change happens at the top, right? But we need roots. Okay. So we need roots for the tree to grow so that we can have that top cover, so that we can have those things, right? So getting involved in your local, I love that. Call your local board of education. What a great way to start. Get involved. Get involved with your school board, with your local school board. Go to the school board meetings. They are horrible. They are absolutely dry as all get out. Can't confirm because I go to mine, but there's a lot of great information being passed there and a lot of decisions that are being made there. And this is your chance to have your voice be heard, especially our military community. As we said earlier, this impacts us at a much higher rate than it does our civilian counterparts. So it is even more imperative for us to get involved and for our voices to be heard, even though, and I love this, Rob and I, and I've heard you say it a lot, Rob and I both love living our lives as excuse me, what would we say? Servant leaders.
Servant
That
leaders.
was the word. That I love that. And a lot of our military members come from this understanding, and a lot of us have this servant leadership. And whenever we hear servant, we a lot of times hear the words quiet professional, right? And I love what you said. Don't be quiet. Be a bulldog. Be that person that champions for the others, right? Because some people don't have that gift, Tiffany, as you know. A lot of people don't have the gift to be able to stand up for others and be an advocate. So, we love what you're doing. What are you doing now? Now that you've moved on, I've heard a lot that you have done. What are you doing currently, Tiffany?
So currently I'm advocating for more options for children and school. So what we know that the world has changed post-COVID, and how do we make our education system as unique as the children that it is supposed to serve? It's not public school versus private school. It's what's the best options for kids. And I have the distinct privilege to be able to lobby in several states and work with legislators. Same thing as we were talking earlier about advocacy. It's getting legislators to see these neat, innovative, incubator type schools and other ways to learn. One size doesn't fit all anymore. So I have options, working on that throughout the US, which is exciting.
So I think we should agree that one size fits all never worked. I think we're figuring that out. So it's time to close that loop. Sorry, Rob, I didn't mean to speak over you, Bubba.
No. You're fine. You're fine. I do have a question, Tiffany, because I think we've all three said it multiple times. But what is a lobbyist? What does that mean?
So someone who advocates for a select issue. And I tell folks I get to advocate for education, previously described with my service. And I'm an advocate for people with special needs, people with disabilities, getting access. And I also believe whenever our legislators, no matter state, local, and even federal, when you come to them with problems, also come to them with the solutions. They have to be generalists, right? They have to know as much about higher education as they do water and tax. So show them the solution and what's the way. Obviously, you have to tell them about the problem, right? 14C is a problem. But then how do we take them to be like, hey, this is what someone getting sub-minimum wage, what does that look like? Well, they're required to be on benefits even longer. How can we innovate and break old archaic systems? One size does not fit all, for the betterment and for the good of society. So it's just educating, coming with ideas, coming with policy language, coming with, working with other partners in the same space to come up with smart public policy solutions.
I love that. I love what you said. The wording was so great because you said it earlier. Sometimes the way we go about advocating for others is just reiterating the problem. And that's what we see now, especially, and I'm not trying to, my generation, I'll just take it on the chin. We do a great job of laying out the problem, but no one's coming with solutions. And so whenever I think of advocating, it's not just going around and shouting, this is the problem, this is the issue. But to your point, finding a solution to that problem and advocating for the solution, it doesn't always have to be, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't always have to be letting people know that there is a problem, but more importantly, what the solution is to that problem. That's the change that maybe I can make. Because I'm thinking, well, what can I do, right? Because maybe I'm a person, I don't like being on the phone. Maybe I don't want to call, or I don't have the ability to, or I don't have the ability to go and picket, in Austin. So what can I do? Maybe just advocating a little bit louder the effective change that you see that's out there for the issue that's in front of you. In this case, individuals with special needs need a little more attention. So how can we fix that? Sorry, I just wanted to couch that in a different way.
No, Robin, you're exactly right. There's so many different ways to advocate with your voice, right? You can reach out to your member through email. You can call the office. If you don't want to call, they're all on Twitter. And I'm not advocating to be thumb warriors, but bringing solutions to what's needed or the access that should be available to all. So how do we do that? But not only do it in a collective impact, but with a voice that's sincere and kind. One of my favorite leaders that I follow is Arthur Brooks. He's a professor at Harvard. He has a lot of books. I had the opportunity to be a part of the American Enterprise Fellowship Program. And Arthur always says, no one has ever insulted anyone into agreement. So I challenge all the folks that are yelling and picketing. How can you pivot from throwing insults to finding common solutions? That's what sets us apart in this great country, is when we do come together. And again, back to President Bush, who was a servant leader, finding common ground. We all should have learned in kindergarten how to play in the sandbox together. And I will find that there are adults who did not and probably need some therapy. But, right? We're better together.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I'm not ashamed to admit I had to repeat kindergarten. I didn't share will. But I learned that. Okay? And as you're talking, but you're talking about it, and for me, as I go back to me as a parent, I mean, it's almost like dealing with children. They're yelling at each other. They're just spewing at each other. And what does that do? That just further entrenches everyone. So maybe it's time to act more of like an adult and come at it from a place of understanding and instead bring solutions. Well, I love that. That immediately resonated with me. I'm like, oh God, it's like dealing with my kids.
Tiffany, thank you so much for being here with us on DEStalks. We have thoroughly enjoyed having you. We hope that you would come back and be with us again and further this conversation.
This has been so much fun. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And for all of our DEStalkers out there, if you have questions and if you have comments, solutions to the problems that we face, drop those here in the comments below. Send us a DM. We'll get you in contact with Miss Barfield. And we love the fact that you were here. I just can't say that enough. I love the energy around our conversation today. I don't want to end it, but we do. So make sure that you come back. You check us out. This episode will be airing. When was that, Rob? I think I have it here. This episode
Operations Guy.
There you go. Thursday the 13th of February. This episode will be airing, so make sure that you come back and check us out. We look forward to seeing you there. Tiffany, good to be with you today. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks so much. You'll have a good one.
Thank you.
You too. Bye.